Hi there, and today I'm just talking about how to fix white balance issues in your image. And here we have, I've just loaded up this image into Camera Raw, and you can probably tell that this image has got a kind of yellowish cast to it. And this is the sort of thing that most of us have encountered, particularly if you shoot indoors with some kind of artificial light. The worst case, which we've all seen, is probably these sort of incredibly sort of yellow orange cast images, which you get from an old-fashioned tungsten bulb. A lot of sort of modern domestic lights are a bit cooler, but so the problem we have is we've got a yellowish cast on the image, which we don't really want. We'd like to get rid of it. Now, the older way of doing this, which I used to use, I used to go for the white balance drop down, and I would perhaps select auto, which in this case isn't too bad. That's giving us quite a reasonable balance. If I was to select tungsten, as you can see, what's happened here is instead of having a yellowish cast in the image, we've now got a blue cast because it's really it's overcompensated. And so this way of doing it gives you a sort of fairly simple. If you use daylight, obviously it's going to cast it much more yellow. So we return to as shot, and this is I suppose I would now see this as a more primitive way of doing this. And what I would be much more likely to go for is to select the white balance tool up here on this top menu. And then what I can do is I can just click anywhere in the image where I feel there's a sort of good white tone. And I can experiment. If I go over here, you'll notice we're getting much more blue. It's pushing the temperature up towards the blue end of things more and more. And what I don't want, as we've just seen, what I don't want is to replace the yellow cast with another cast, a bluish cast. What I would like to be able to do is start my edit off by setting a realistic white balance that looks natural and that doesn't look cast in any particular way. And the advantage of this tool is it just allows me to very easily experiment. I can click anywhere. I can try on this clock face. And I can just experiment quickly and easily with whatever seems to me, I'll just zoom in a little bit, whatever seems to be giving a more realistic white balance. I can, down here I have a control which just lets me toggle, and when I go back to the original, it seems much more, the yellow cast seems much more sort of prominent in comparison. The one thing that I always want to do, and particularly if I've got an image like this where I've got some sort of human skin on the subject, I would really like to try and get a sort of realistic looking skin tone to begin with. And if you look at the original white balance, we have got this very sort of yellowish cast on the model's skin, which I don't like at all. So I tend to very much focus on the skin tones, particularly where we've got an image of a person. And as I say, I can just very quickly try out, this is really the advantage of this, is it lets me try out a number of different options. And it lets, I mean, I could I suppose you can actually just move these sliders, which will give you the same effect. But it's just easier to use the dropper tool. And so I can experiment. I can spend as long on this as I want to. I don't usually want to spend a huge amount of time on it. I'll usually just, as I've been doing, I'll get something which represents something which is too overcorrected, too blue, still unbalanced, but in the other direction. And I'll get to a point where, say, something like this, I think, is giving me... this is a good starting point for my edit. And as always, I can check back to the original, toggle back to what I've done. And I would, at this point, I think I would probably say, yeah, that looks okay. At this point, I will also, if I need to adjust exposure, I will, but in this case, I don't. And there's a lot of other things I'm going to do in this edit, but what I'm really looking for here is to just fix, as I say, white balance and exposure to give me the starting point for my edit. And then obviously when I've, if I just go into Photoshop now, now that's done, I can make other color changes. I mean, I quite frequently push some selective red onto the skin just to make the skin glow a little bit more. Or I might go into curves and I might go for my, what is now to some extent my signature color edit, which is just to push a little bit of cyan at the bottom end, compensate with some reds at the top, push a little blue and compensate with a little yellow. But you know, whatever you wish to do in terms of color processing of your image, subsequently you can do. But the key thing is that you are starting from a good and hopefully reasonably sort of realistic white balance. And so, okay, that's it really. That's all there is to it. It's a very quick and easy way to fix white balance and get your edit off to a really good start. So, hope that's useful, and as always, thanks for listening and watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.